Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to start a new series being a rewrite series. So a rewrite series is in question where I take a movie and I improve upon some of the points that was made. Many videos have been done on this. Heavily ones I've seen of the amazing Spider-Man movies, particularly I've seen a lot of. I've seen a lot of different movies get rewrites. I thought I'll do one on the Transformers movies. These movies have gotten rewrites, but the rewrites have been major ones. They haven't been ones that actually keep most of the stuff intact. Most of them are big fat rewrites that alter the entire trajectory of the story. I like the rewrite that I've seen, but I want one that can fit into the version of how I would do it in the Michael Bay continuity. This would be a Michael Bay version, but still respect the G1 continuity it's based on. Now, since this is only a few changes, I don't want to make too many big changes to the film. So we'll only be making tiny changes to the film, and yeah, the main big changes will obviously be Megan Fox. As many know, she was featured in the first two films. She was sadly let off the franchise after she did some controversial talks in an interview, talked about how Michael Bay was like compared to Hitler, and she was fired from the project. Due to this controversy, she was often not let on other projects, and there was a lot of other projects she wasn't really let on, and this led to a decline in her career. So yeah, and the movie released then was the biggest, is the highest grossing Transformers movie, and still is to this day. The second place one is sadly Age of Extinction, but that's a whole nother discussion. But this film will be the first rewrite. There'll be a few added in scenes to it, so expect some stuff to be added into it. So yeah. Besides that, yeah, it'd be mostly the same film. I was gonna start a rewrite from the fourth movie and onward, but I thought this would be the best one to start off with, considering it's only a few changes and it set up the storylines I want. It would set up just like lay the groundwork, just basically lay it down for me to continue storyline onwards. So yeah. This to kind of end the humans element in the franchise. The next movies will kind of focus more on later different elements. And the characters will get a bit of redesigns due to their injuries sustained from the Chicago fights. So yeah, giving a kind of reason for them to have a bit of redesigns, and obviously to make new toys. So yeah. So here's how the movie starts off. Obviously, it opens with the Paramount logo and all that, and obviously the Cybertron opening where Optimus narrates, and the Ark escapes all the way to tries to escape off Cybertron and gets blasted away. Obviously, it lands on the moon, triggering the space race, and then the Earth, and then the people from Earth go to the moon, triggering the space race of Apollo 11, landing on the moon. They look through the ship, they take some photos, and take some items, photos, and take some evidence, and they bring it back down to Earth, and they investigate it a bit. And well, after that, yeah, Sector 7 is mentioned to be in this movie, so that just keeps some nice continuity. Sector 7 ends up taking, after NASA shut down, Sector 7 confiscates all the files from them and sends them to Area 51. Area 51 is where they send all their other supernatural items, mostly experimental weapons are sent there, and they send them all into storage, which is where the Hoover Dam was. The Hoover Dam was where they had some of the items from the moon landing. That's where they're sent to. Say, but yeah, after that, well, pretty much the movie goes the same. The newscaster narrates about Earth and all that, and then it will go inside Sentinel's eye and will show the logo transforming. And this is where the big changes are made. After the screen goes to black, Mikaela Baines will be walking up the steps in the same outfit as Carly, with black underwear and a white shirt, and the bra obviously underneath it. We'll be obviously wearing that. But we'll go up to Sam's room and talk to him, give him his lucky bunny, as she called it, hop on top of him, they'll talk for a bit, and then leave. She'll get her clothes ready and walk down the steps while Sam gets dressed. She gets dressed too, and they talk a bit about how he got a medal, and yeah, and all about his time from being a hero of the first two movies. And we see the flashback scene, except it's a bit different. In this scene, it starts off the same, but with Mikaela in it, and even Leo makes a cameo. He makes a cameo in the scene just to confirm that he's still around. So Sam's mom and dad, Sam himself, Mikaela, and Leo all there. After coming out from getting the medals, Sam runs in to Carly, but just shakes her hand. Carly shakes his hand. After taking a selfie, Carly shakes Sam and Michaela's hand. And after chatting, they knock down off a glass thingy and talk. Obviously, Sam does not flirt with her since he's still with Mikaela, so the scene is a bit heavily altered. So yeah, this is still in the film, but in a different capacity. After this scene, well, After that, while they continue talking and they kiss for a bit, Mikaela will be again in the same outfit Carly was wearing, a white dress with dark red high heels, obviously same as the original one, and she'll be walking off not in a fur coat and a leather jacket and leaving to go to a job. Whilst she'll be leaving to go on a job, I don't remember. She'll be leaving to go on a job. Whilst he smacks Brains for interrupting his privacy. Later on, he ends up letting in Wheelie and his Michaela's dog. After this, Wheelie gets on the couch, and in the original film, Wheelie says this: "Sam, I don't know about moving in with this chick. What if she dumps us like the last girl?" And Brain says, "Yeah, she was mean. I didn't like her." I try my best Brains impressions. I'm not that good with impressions. So yeah, after saying that, so instead, Wheelie would say, "Sam, I don't know about moving in with this chick. Why can't we just go back and live with Darby? Yeah, she's grumpy and mean. I actually like the dude." So yeah, this will obviously mention Jack Darby, the one from Transformers Prime. This is a small little mention to Jack Darby's character, who he met in college. This will be just a hint to Jack Darby, one of the many people he lived in college. So yeah. Either that or be Leo or Jack Darby. So yeah, it'll either be Leo or Jack Darby that he interacts with. So yeah, after this scene, well, he does not mention how that Carly is best for him. That is not mentioned. He just stays quiet throughout the entire conversation, and yeah. And well, after that, he goes out to gets dressed and goes outside and runs to his parents, and he talks to them about going to job interviews and all that. And he's about to go get into his yellow in his car, but it's broken down, so he ends up going with his parents. And then after that, obviously cuts to the scene with Optimus talking about how different Earth has changed since they've arrived, and mention a bunch of different upgrades and he mentioned so many different things, and during that time, I also mentioned the Chernobyl event. Chernobyl, where they go to Chernobyl, Shockwave attacks with his driller, distracting them, and so that Optimus will transform, fight the driller a bit, and chop off the part of the driller that had the engine part. So after doing that, obviously the the Russian informant that talked to them earlier, well, he was obviously killed. He was killed by Laserbeak. After that, we cut back to Sam and Sam's mom and dad driving him to interviews, and obviously the scene plays exactly the same. Him going to interviews and failing at nearly all of them. The same thing goes with the Accurator Systems thing, so yeah, pretty much it just goes on the same throughout the entire scene. And then obviously after that, the scene after that will take place. So yeah. After that will be the scene at the nest base where they pretty much just go over the things of what happened so far, and then obviously so Optimus will transform and get angry, yell at them about what the hell happened. Yeah, mostly basically the same thing happened at the nest area, and yeah. After that, well, the entire conversation, Buzz Aldrin and all that, they'll talk about the moon landing and all that, and Optimus will mention Sentinel Prime and all that, and after that, well, then we'll jump back to Sam. We'll jump back to Sam's thing where he's gone over to see Carly and talked about how he got his job. And Mikaela will hug him, telling him it's great that he's gotten the job, and yeah, and mention about how Dylan Good is the coolest guy ever, and all of that. And obviously, Dylan Good introduces himself. He obviously chats. He obviously does some back and forth with Carly, back and forth banter with Carly. This gets Sam a bit jealous, and obviously we then see the photos of Mikaela and Dylan together. So yeah, and then obviously we get after that they leave the building. Sam being a bit jealous about all the nicknames and all that, and the smiling back part. So when the car doesn't start, he takes out his frustrations on the car. So Dylan talks about how he's a member of the board from Accurator Systems, and he put in a recommendation for him. Mikaela saying she's so proud of him is good, and he's a lucky man. Now this makes more sense with Mikaela. If it was Carly, that makes no sense, because what is she proud of exactly? She's only seen what's happened in the first two movies are merely stories. They're stories that she's heard of. With Mikaela, that was first hand. So it would make more sense for this to be for Mikaela. And it would make more sense for Mikaela's dog to be with Sam. So yeah, and it make more sense that they're living together. And it make more sense that all of this will make more sense. The scene with them about the job, all this will make more sense. Overall, it'll make more sense. So yeah, obviously after the scene in which After the scene in which, Dylan talks about how he's so proud, how he's a lucky man, and after that, it would obviously cut to the next scene, and yeah, cut to the scene of the next scene that happens after the movie, probably the Xanthium scene or something. The next scene that happens, it will cut to that, and obviously the rest of the movie will play out so far the same until we get to the next scene with Sam and Carly. That would be him at his job. This is now where we get to the part of Sam going to his job for the first time, just after Laserbeak had been ordered by Lord Megatron to kill all those humans. Also, prior to that, so after the scene with Dylan Gould, the Xanthium was approaching the Ark, and so they got it in there and all that. Took Sentinel home. Then we cut back to Africa where Megatron and all that, and the same scene basically plays out with Laserbeak killing them all, killing that guy in his house disguised as Pink Bumblebee. After that, Sam entering his job, literally the entire shot of Sam entering his job, up to the Mercedes Benz pulling up is just exactly the same. The guy, his boss yells at him to go do his job, and a Mercedes pulls up. Not Mercedes Benz, but a Mercedes pulls up. And out of it steps Mikaela, not Carly. But this time, Mikaela is in a completely different dress. As you guys may know, if you guys search up Transformers 3 Megan Fox, there's a shot of her in a white dress with black stripes and a black jacket with her in black high heels. This, in turn, would be what she'd be wearing, I believe, when she goes to visit Sam at the office. So this is what she'd be wearing when she does that scene. So she'll obviously come visit him, give him his favorite thingy. They'll talk. They'll go into his office where he goes to set up a meeting, and she talks about how he got her Mercedes, and he types up the computer and realizes it's a very expensive car, and realizes they could buy it for a house. Now, it make more sense for Mikaela to be resistant of wanting to sell the car, because she loves cars, and this would be a big opportunity for her to get a car like this. So yeah, obviously she'd be more resistant. And it'll make more sense because, Carly was from the British Embassy. Why would she quit the British Embassy when she could clearly just stay there? The British Embassy, yeah. It made more sense for Mikaela to be in this movie. So, continuing the scene, after Sam and Mikaela would go back to his desk, and, obviously would see Jimmy Jerry Wan, who was earlier peeking over at Sam, and one of his co-workers interrupted him, and he knocked his things down. And then later on in the film, where Sam and Carly were going to the meeting room, where he was putting down the files, and they were talking about about her car. He was peeking down behind a girl at a printer. So obviously, as they were walking back, Bruce, the one who works for them, walked over and talked to him with Sam's boss over there, and they were talking. And so yeah. Obviously, they were chatting a bit, and yeah, Mikaela got in that red color thingy and then walked away. It's not as sexualized as it is in the movie. She just says, see you, Sam," and then pats him on the shoulder, and then sees him, and then she leaves, and yeah. After leaving, the entire office scene pretty much plays out the same way, and yeah, pretty much every other scene plays out the same way. So yeah. Besides that, the scenes mostly play out the same with Sam in his office. Obviously, later on in the elevator, he gets attacked by Jerry and gets stand down in the toilet, and Wayne gives him info. And obviously, after that, he goes to after his boss tells him he's dropped something, he goes to pass by Jerry Wayne. Obviously, Jerry gets interrogated by Laserbeak while Sam is interrupting. He then leaves. After leaving, Jerry realizes we realize that Laserbeak is indeed interrogating Jerry Wayne, telling him what he asked. Because Laserbeak was probably not going to kill him, but likely was, because he's a con. Laserbeak is a Decepticon. After that, Jerry tries to attack him, but Laserbeak pushes him out the window and kills him, making it look like he committed suicide. Because, he was a very suicidal person. After killing him, obviously he disguised himself as a Japanese printer, apparently, and so when he's after coming out of disguise, shoots another one of Sam's co-workers, and tries to chase after Sam, and obviously he runs away. And then after that, we get the scene when he arrives at the new nest base with Mikaela instead. Mikaela would indeed be in the same clothes that Carly was in. Because, there's not that much to change. Mikaela would have a leather jacket on, though. A blue jacket on to represent the blue jacket she wore when they first met. So, yeah. Besides that, they would try to get in the base. Sam would try and drive. They'll get knocked. They'll get their car would get disabled. He'll get knocked to the ground. He'll call on Bumblebee. Bumblebee would arrive, de-escalate the situation, and Sam would talk to Bean. Obviously, they'll let him. They'll let Lennox would like to see him, and so after that, Sam and Mikaela went in there to go see him. And well, yeah, he complained to the guards and talked to Lennox, and well, yeah. Whilst talking, it would cut to another scene with all the other Autobots, with Ironhide sadly mentioning that Jolt was indeed taking his when Optimus was earlier. Ironhide in another scene after passing by the guards and talking to Lennox, Skids was talking with Mudflap. Ironhide, Skids, and Mudflap were indeed talking about the sad passing of Jolt, who had sadly lost his life. Jolt was very close to Sideswipe, so Sideswipe, Skids, and Mudflap were all talking about how Jolt got shot and killed by Shockwave, keeping the canon that Jolt was shot by Shockwave. After Jolt, it's revealed that he was killed by Shockwave off screen. Even though it was a sad death, there was no way to fit it into my version of Dark of the Moon. So it's implied that he's killed off. And yes, Skids and Mudflap do appear to keep them consistent, and all the scenes they appear in before will be in this movie. So yeah. After that, well, obviously, Lennox and Sam will be talking about the dark side of the moon and all that. And, well, Charlotte Meering will be denying all the claims about how it's not that big of a situation, and and also Sam again offends and pisses off and kind of irritates Charlotte Meering, and well, Director Meering as she's called, and obviously, well, the office scene where they're talking, and she just disperses him as a messenger. He's always been a messenger. And then Mikaela would say he's a hero. This would make more sense coming from Mikaela. She's seen him being a hero firsthand twice. So this would make more sense for Mikaela to say this, not Carly again. So after that scene, well, obviously Sam would be back in the house, and Wheelie would be talking about them, how they got kicked out. And so yeah, Sam would walk to B, obviously, after they drove back. And obviously, like I said earlier, Optimus did revive Sentinel, and Sentinel did nearly attack him. They talked a bit, and after that, well, obviously, Mikaela and Sam would have had that talk with Charlotte in his office about him being a messenger, and then she would have said he's a hero. Then they would have gone back to his apartment, and he would have talked to them about it, wheeling them and realized to call Agent Simmons. So he did. The entire interview scene goes out exactly the same, and pretty much, yeah. After that interview, Dutch, his butler, or like his assistant butler / butler, told him about Sam Witwicky. Sam called him, told him about the dark side of the moon theory, and they started talking about figuring out the mystery of it. Obviously, Mikaela came back. Obviously, his boss, Bruce, came in and gave him the file. Bruce saw Bumblebee. Obviously, left after Simmons told him he's not cleared for this investigation. He leaves. Mikaela comes in, and then Bumblebee destroyed the chandelier, and Mikaela asks what's going on, and then when he tries to touch the fresco, Mikaela says don't touch him. And obviously, this would keep the constant theme of Mikaela being the manly one in the relationship. This would keep the consistent theme, and this would make more sense since Carly hasn't been really established. Mikaela's been established as a toughest nuts woman and a tough girl. So Sam would become more manlier over the course of the movie. So, yeah, after the scene, Mikaela would get into a dress similar to the one we saw in the actual Dark of the Moon, a blue glittered dress. Obviously, it would have her with she would see her in high heels, black high heels specifically. So yeah, obviously they'll have an argument. Obviously, they'll have an argument where they'll leave, and well, she'd rip off the foot and leave it with them, and then drive off. And Sam will continue his investigation about the dark side of the moon and all that. And obviously the scene with Sentinel and Optimus about leading them again will happen in that off-coast area on the grass. After that, well, obviously after that will be a scene where Sam drives off with Dutch and them to go to a Russian area where there's a bunch of Russians who are set to go to the dark side of the moon. but they didn't. Obviously, the entire fight scene where they have a bar fight happens again. Then they talk about the secret rocks on the moon, and obviously that entirely happens. And then after that, the highway chase is exactly the same. And then after that, when they get to the nest base, the Russian standoff happens the same with Sideswipe and Ironhide battle and all that. After they get into the nest base, the entire scene plays out the same way with yes. And after that, nearly the entire scene plays out the same way. Now, here's where the theme will change. Obviously, Ironhide still dies on the same grim fates after dying, because this gives us a motivation for him to want to die. So, obviously, he dies in this movie, sadly, even though I don't want him to, he still dies. So, after getting killed and after shooting him a bit, Bumblebee and others all survive, but Ironhide ends up dying. And so, when he runs off to go to the other entrance, and after Lennox tells anyone to not engage Sentinel, Sentinel transforms and passes by Skids and Mudflap. And one of the humans or Autobots tells Skids that emergency, Ironhide Sentinel is turned against him and is shot Ironhide and wounded humans. Skids and Mudflap turn around to aim their guns. Sentinel, hearing this, takes out his gun and shoots Mudflap in the chest. So Skids runs into the rage. Sentinel takes out his sword one-bladed at a time and slices his side open, leaking energon a bit, injuring him a tiny bit, and then planning to leave, Skids he shoots Mudflap in the chest a second time, and as Skids comes towards him, he takes out his blade and chops him in half, leaving his legs there and then his body falling down next to Mudflap, and shoots Mudflap a third time to give the final blow to him. After that, Mudflap dies from rust like Ironhide, and Skids dies due to loss of energon. But they hold hands as they pass off, killing them off and finally making a death scene for them. After that, Charlotte Mir will arrive, and obviously would see Sentinel's rampage and trying to take the pillars, and he escapes with them. Optimus later arrives, all that, and Charlotte Blade tells Optimus what he did. And so after Sam looks at him, Optimus goes to hunt after Sentinel. So Sam obviously returns back to his apartment looking for Mikaela. After that, obviously, so yeah. Any other scenes that play out after that pretty much play out the same. We then cut to the Washington, D.C. scene where Optimus sees Sentinel starting the transports, and Megatron explaining what happened, mentioning how this is the rendezvous on Earth before fate waylaid them both. And so after that, he shoots Abraham Lincoln and then sits in the chair. And then Optimus obviously arrives and tells Sentinel not to activate it. He does, and then obviously the Washington, D.C. event happens, and a bunch of Decepticons come through the portal. And after that, he luckily escapes, and after escaping from it, obviously he engages Sentinel by tackling him to the ground, and they argue a bit, and they talk back and forth, and after talking, Sam goes into his earlier in that scene. Sam had gone to his parents' trailer to ask him about advice on Sam, Mikaela, on how to work it, and obviously there's no mentioning of them about him hooking up with one world-class hottie, and so yeah. And obviously they talk about how is Mikaela the one for him, and he says yeah, she's the one. And then Sam's mom says a bit about all their relationship and all that, and then Sam leaves, telling them to get out of the town. And after that, he goes to his car to drive off. Obviously, after that, the scene on Washington, D.C. will take place, like I said earlier. Then him trying to go to Dylan's place to find Mikaela. Obviously, Mikaela and Dylan are talking. And, after this talk, obviously, Dylan talks to Sam tells Dylan to Sam interrupts them and takes Mikaela home to talk, and on the way there, Dylan reveals his dark side and reveals that he's on the side of the Decepticons, and reveals all that later on as they leave. Soundwave transforms, blah blah blah. Mikaela gets kidnapped by Soundwave, and Sam gets forced as a spy for the Autobots, and now this all makes sense that indeed Mikaela only got the job because Dylan was looking for a way to get a spy close with the Autobots. Sam Witwicky was that spy. Mikaela needed a job, so he used Mikaela to get through to Sam, making him a target, and getting him into Accurata systems made it so that Laserbeak, who had many informants on there already, could mean he could access him and kill him. Obviously that didn't work, so he knew he needed a spy. So with getting a spy there, Well, after getting that watch that tells him they'll attack his nervous system every time, and he says that Mikaela will be safe, he has his word. After that, he gets dragged off, and well, obviously, the next scene happens, and we talk, and a bunch of generals and high-ranking generals and presidents meet about how they're now at DevCon 1 and all the issues that have been happening about Decepticons being active. All around 200 Decepticons are now in hiding, plus the other nearly 20 Decepticons that were already in hiding on Earth during the events of the first two films. And so, yeah. And obviously, after this, well, they get the message from Sentinel about them leaving their planet. And so, yeah. And after getting told to leave the planet, well, obviously Sam's taken to Charlotte to the old nest to one of the nest henners, and obviously Sam obviously talking to Charlotte Murin over what we had watched stuff that's happening with them. Then Simmons and Dutch run into Charlotte Murin. They banter for a little bit and talk about how exiling Autobots is not going to solve a damn thing. That being Optimus, Bumblebee, Ratchet, Ironhide died earlier, Sideswipe, Dino, Q, Litfoot, Robuster, Topspin. Now, obviously, you get the same shot after that about Sam talking a bit with Charlotte on the plane, and then arriving there, we get introduced to the Wreckers. We'd see Epps again. We would see them getting exiled again, the ship getting destroyed, and then the scene with Dylan holding Mikaela hostage and puts them on the helicopter, and then later on, as the Autobot ship launches. Dylan calls Sam, and obviously, they now finding out what happened, sends the message to Starscream, who blows up the ship. And obviously, it falls to the ground, and Sam later on realizes the mistake realizes what they were doing. And so after that, kills the little Decepticon bug and minicon that was on his hand and steps on it, killing it. After that, well, now the next few scenes happen where they now realize that what has been destroyed, and so with a little bit of help, he gets help from Epps, and they talk about some old nestmates he has, and some of them would even be former characters we saw in the very first movie, and new characters that we saw in the third movie. So yeah, and after that, well, after Epps telling him why he wants to help Sam, and so yeah. After that, yeah. Obviously, later on, we see to the scene where they take all those cases and pillows and take them and drive them away. And obviously, Carly held kidnapped at that area and held at the Trump Tower and all that. And watching Megatron drive up, the invasion of Chicago, everything. Obviously, all that has been kept the same, except with Mikaela instead and not Carly. So yeah. After that, well, we get the next scene. We get the scene where Epps, Sam all go with the prominent people into the damaged Chicago. And then we get the iridescent scene, song playing in the background, really showing all the hope, and we see all the destruction that has been lost since the event. And it turns out that here's what happened to most human population. About 40% has been killed, 50% has been taken prisoner. Most of the people in Chicago have been taken prisoner. The rest of the world has so far been safe, but so far what they're trying to do is turn Chicago into their fortress, Decepticon Island. And once they set up shop at Decepticon in Chicago, they're going to expand to the rest of the world. Obviously, all the Decepticons, after launching the pillows in the air, take ready and bridge back to Chicago, getting ready for the major battle in Chicago. Obviously, some of the Decepticons do go back into hiding in certain areas so that they don't get hunted down by the end of the film. So yeah, continuing on, Chicago has been destroyed, and mostly 60% of the population at Chicago, about 67 of about 60% of the population in Chicago has been taken prisoner, and about 30% of them has been killed, and 10% have been unknown to be taken prisoner. So about 60% have been taken prisoner, 30% have been killed, and 10% have so far been on the run so far. So yeah. And anywho, during this scene, obviously Sam wants to try and continue to find Mikaela with or without the help, and Epps tells him it's over. But when a ship comes after them and then it kills them, it gets destroyed, and it turns out the Autobots are back. But it is not. Optimus does not say we will kill them all. Optimus will come in and say no, and we'll say something different along a different line or something. I don't know. I'll be saying, I don't know, something along the lines of freedom is everyone's right. Freedom's right. But yeah, continuing after that, the Autobots would obviously come back, and the Autobots would talk about how they escaped, and after that, and set up plans to go find Carly and go to Chicago. Bumblebee and Sam would be in an old ship, and Epps and all the other Nest people would be within. Would be with driving within Q with Dino, and Wheelie would be also in driving with Leadfoot, with all the Autobots transforming and rolling out to the scene and going to drive up to save Carly. Obviously, Mikaela, I mean, going to save Mikaela. Sorry, it's trying to replace Carly with Mikaela. It's weird saying Mikaela's name in this movie. Obviously, we see the scene where Mikaela looks at what's going on in the other building with all the Decepticons. Obviously, after that, well, they talk about how the city is secured, and Sentinel talks about how Megatron is not working for Megatron. He is just no. He'd be wise to know the difference. After that, Mikaela realizes what could happen. That means Megatron's basically Sentinel's bitch, as she would say it, as Mikaela would say it, says it. So after that, not long after that, the ship would soon arrive at the area and soon land, and obviously the scenes would all play out the same. Then soon the ship would land there, and obviously Sam would be able to get Mikaela back, and Mikaela would do a better job than Carly. Mikaela, obviously, Sam was thought to get chucked out of the building, but lives, and so screams out Mikaela's name. So she slaps him, punches him. So she punches him, kicks him in the balls, and then kicks him kicks him in the chest, and again punches him in the face, and then slaps Dylan Gould, and then jumps into the ship, and they take it and fire it at Dylan Gould's a nice apartment suite. And after that, they drive down and get shot out of the air by Laserbeak, and they crash the ship in the middle of Chicago. And obviously later on after that, yeah, Dylan escapes and is able to tell them the Autobots are alive. After the Autobots arrive to find Bumblebee, Sam, and Mikaela all at the scene. And after that, they find the drone, tell them where it is, and the collision of the pillars. After the location of the pillars is revealed, well, they end up sending a bunch of men out there. Lennox does a little speech to convince them, and they all do. And later on, Sam convinces them where they can fire the missile from, and indeed, Mikaela gets into something much more form-fitting, and so yeah, she just is in better new clothing that they luckily had spare of. So she got into new pants, clothing that Sam had brought just in case for her, and brings her iconic blue jacket from the original film just to tie it around. She would have her blue jacket from the original film along with a red jacket underneath it, and yeah, and would have the boots she had from the original movie. So yeah, obviously they'll leave and then go run after obviously the big skyscraper scene would take place again, and yeah, and they'll shoot the glass and all that. Basically, the entire tower scene would take place the same way, but with Mikaela instead, all that, and mostly the same stuff would take place. Except now, here's where another change would be made. So Starscream would not die. Instead, this death will be given to another character, another Jet character. So yeah, another Decepticon will indeed, who's been from the last movies, will indeed come back and try to kill Sam, but end up dying trying to kill him. So a very little known character called I don't know, one of the many Decepticons from the film, shall we say maybe I don't know, one of the many Decepticons that were hunted for that was a jet. I'd say Skyquake. Skyquake was a very well-known character, but so yeah, this shall be Blitzwing. So Blitzwing trying to chases after Sam and separates them from the group. And obviously, so yeah, he dies quickly. He's not really meant to be an integral character, sort of. Skyquake is meant to be a small character. Instead, it'll be Skyquake. Skyquake ends up dying the same way Starscream does, getting his head blown off, and so yeah, Bumblebee saves them and all that, and Mikaela and Sam all run to Bumblebee makes sure to stay with them so that he can protect them and keep them safe. And so, yeah, while keeping them safe, later on it turns out his team is in trouble, so he heads there to try and help them, but is instead ambushed, and it's a trap. So Bumblebee gets caught, and obviously later on it's found out that it's them under traps. So Sam and Mikaela try to go after them. Obviously Wheelie and Brains, who were earlier taking that ship, got sucked into the mothership, and obviously took it and landed there and made sure to rip the ship apart. And the scene between Bumblebee, all that, and he kills Soundwave and all that, basically plays out the same way in the movie, and it ends with them killing him. After that, that scene practically takes place. The next scene is the same, all of that. The Battle of Chicago is pretty much the same, more Autobot shots. So yeah, after that, well, Yeah, practically that's the same, and it will show the other shots of Chicago where the Autobots are attacking and getting the upper hand on them and pretty much winning the battle and turning the tide in their favor. So whilst turning the tide in their favor, they ordered to get the bridge lowered down, and soon after that, well, obviously the battle pretty much goes the same way. Blah de blah de blah. Carly ends up going with half of the other squad. Sam decides to go help them later on in the film. Obviously, after they destroy the gunships that the Decepticons had, obviously Sam and Mikaela are in Chicago's area where Optimus does his raid scene, and obviously Cybertron is now about to come down to Earth, and so Optimus flies down in his flight suits, and obviously the rest of the early parts of the film where his trailer get knocked off and all that, Shockwave, all played out the same. Optimus comes down in his rage and takes them all down, and indeed hurts Shockwave by shooting him in the eye and injures him. And obviously Barricade is a part of this scene too, and is indeed knocked back by him, and being a coward kind of takes off and drives off, learning to fight another day. And well, after that, pretty much after that, well, Optimus takes down Shockwave and kills him. He does end up coming back in the later film, so expect him to be back again, because yeah. So yeah, after he gets taken down, he shoots the thingy that had he shoots the column that had the pillar that controlled everything, and it shuts off the space bridge. Obviously, Optimus and Sentinel have their fight. Sam tells Mikaela to stay, but Mikaela goes with him anyway, wanting to stay with him but won't go without him. So goes with them and runs with him to stop the pillar. Obviously, she goes off with a different squadron, and Sam fights with Dylan, obviously, whilst Optimus and Sentinel have their fights. Sentinel orders all the ships, all the reinforcements to fire at Optimus. Obviously, all the gunships get shot down. And whilst this is happening, Mikaela sees Megatron, and goes towards him and gives him the talk about how the Decepticons finally conquered this planet. And it turns out that Sentinel is actually now their leader. Megatron saying it will be him, it will always be him. Mikaela says, you'll be nothing but Sentinel's bitch. This would make more sense coming from Mikaela, seeing how she cowered in the fear of Megatron in the last movie, seeing her overcome that and stand up to save Sam and the rest of the Autobots is truly comes full circle from her being afraid to now her being confident like Sam is at doing this. After that, Megatron goes off to kill Sentinel Prime. Obviously, the rest of the film plays out pretty much the same, with them taking down the gunships, lowering down the bridges. They get the upper hand and Sentinel gets knocked away. Optimus and Sentinel's fight where Optimus loses an arm. He's about to die, but Megatron shoots Sentinel and keeps shooting him. And so after that, yeah, he takes a lot of stuff of Sentinel and shoots him and injures him gravely. Sentinel does not get killed, but does get killed by Optimus in a different capacity, obviously to put him out of his misery. So yeah. Obviously he's tempted but yeah, Megatron tempts him to try and kill him, but Optimus would never do that. But Megatron decides to leave it as it be. So yeah, Megatron leaves and drives away. So yeah. After that, well, after all the ships get retracted, well, Cybertron is now plunged back into its area of the galaxy. Megatron knocks back Sentinel Prime and tells Prime who would he be without him. And Optimus would know that one day he'll find out. And so he takes his axe, slams it into Megatron's arm, and then kicks him back. Tells him to leave and to never return. After that, Megatron leaves to never return, and well, yeah, they let him go. After that, Sentinel talks about how all he wanted was the survival of their race, and he must see why he had to change. Megatron does end up coming back and shooting him in the back. Sentinel is in grave pain, so he orders Optimus to kill him. Optimus doesn't want to do it, but Optimus takes out his pistol and shoots Sentinel in the head, killing him. This would end his life and redeem Optimus and not make him the cold-hearted killer that the movies that made him so famous for. After that, Optimus would drop the gun, realizing that he had just killed somebody he cared for. Even though he was a murderer, in the end, he did what he thought was right for his planet. Optimus would give his speech. Sam would reunite with Mikaela and hug her and kiss her. Same thing would go on. They'll get engaged with a ring, get him engaged, and they would not get married until later films. So they'll finally get engaged, and Bumblebee would now come back to Sam would now finally start living back with Sam again. Now, obviously, Optimus would give his big speech and talk about that, and after that, the movie would end with a with the after credit scene about Charlotte Mirren and Simmons, and then after that, a scene with Sam and Mikaela, and would yeah. That's basically the movie. Would after that the credits would go the same. Rosie Huntington Whiteley would get credited in the credits as a lower character, as a just slightly introduced character, whereas Megan Fox would get put in Rosie Huntington Whiteley's spot. Obviously, Transformers Dark of the Moon ended up not having Megan Fox in it, but for what it was still a good movie, even though it has script issues. I would rather see a version of the film where we finally get Mikaela. One day we might get that. We may never, but I hope one day to see that. But yeah, nonetheless, that was my rewrite of Transformers Dark of the Moon. Tell me what you thought in the comments below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? So yeah, make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell, whatever that mischievous thing may be. And with that, see you guys later. Bye.